Kirk Douglas lived 103 years and earned millions from Hollywood. His son Michael became even richer with a $300 million empire, but when Kirk's will was read, Michael's name wasn't there. $50 million went to strangers instead of family. The decision stunned the entertainment world. People whispered about family feuds and bitter fights, but the real reason Kirk cut out his children had nothing to do with anger. What Michael discovered in his father's final letter changed everything. The truth behind this shocking inheritance will leave you speechless. Kirk Douglas was born Isur Danielovich on December 9, 1916, in a small clapboard house at 46 Eagle Street in Amsterdam, New York. His parents had escaped from Chavasy in Belarus with nothing but fear in their bones, running from pogroms that had wiped out whole neighborhoods. They arrived in America hoping for safety, but all they found was poverty. The house had no running water and no proper bathroom. Harry, his father, dragged home rags and metal every Saturday to sell for pennies. Brina, his mother, cooked for 7 children on a single stove. Milk was a luxury they debated. Bread was stretched to the last crumb. The children shared clothes, beds, and hunger. Isur grew up speaking Yiddish, listening to his parents argue about money, and watching his father drink away the little they had. By 5, he was selling snacks and newspapers to mill workers, sometimes for a nickel. Before he was grown, he held more than 40 small jobs and still went to bed hungry most nights. The house felt too tight with 6 sisters crowding around him and an alcoholic father whose rages could fill every room. Sometimes Harry vanished for weeks, leaving Brina to keep 7 children fed with almost nothing. Isur felt trapped in that house. He later said he was dying to get out, that the tension and shame lit a fire inside him. He hated inviting anyone home because he knew what they would see. Poverty was always in the air. That feeling of wanting to escape pushed him toward dreams that felt too big for a boy in Amsterdam. His first taste of performing came in kindergarten when he recited a poem called The Red Robin of Spring, and the applause hit him like a spark. Through high school, he kept acting in school plays, even when classmates mocked his accent and his immigrant name. Teachers told him he didn't fit the type. But he kept pushing through any insult that came his way. By the time he graduated in 1934, he wanted to study drama, but neither he nor his family had a single dollar to spare for tuition. So he hitchhiked more than 160 miles to St. Lawrence University with only $163 in his pocket and talked his way into a scholarship he didn't actually have. There he worked as a janitor for $1 a night, cleaned classrooms, begged meals from staff, lived off 20 cents a day, and still went undefeated as a student wrestler. By 1938, he was student body president, something almost unheard of for a Jewish immigrant boy in that town. He graduated in 1939 with a degree in English and a lifelong promise to help students who had nothing, just like he once had. After college, he attended the American Academy of Dramatic Arts from 1939 to 1941 and took on a new identity. Isidore Dembski became Kirk Douglas, a name he pulled from a relative he once saw in a phone book. He sharpened his craft in radio and tiny theater shows, but doors kept slamming in his face because he was Jewish. Fraternities shut him out. Casting directors mocked him outright. One Broadway role turned him down without explanation, and he later learned it was only because of his heritage. The sting of that rejection made him swear he would never allow anyone to limit him again. During these years, he even wrestled in traveling carnivals under the name Izzy the Strong, earning $50 a night for brutal fights that left him with a broken nose and bruises that stayed for weeks. He used that money to pay for acting classes and learned, painfully, how far he was willing to go for his dream. His first real job in the theater world was as a soda jerk at the St. James Theater in 1940. He made only $30 a week and spent his breaks watching actors rehearse, hoping one day he would be on that stage. His first big Broadway audition turned into a disaster. He forgot his lines in front of producers, got booed, and walked out humiliated. He thought about quitting, but he refused to let shame win and kept searching for a way forward. During this time, he also dated Betty Persk, Lauren Bacall's sister, and her family's wealth made him feel smaller than ever. Even a $2 diner meal felt out of reach. He broke things off and made a vow to never depend on anyone for survival again. In 1941, he enlisted in the United States Navy as a sub-lieutenant and served on the USS PC-1139, a submarine chaser that saw heavy action in the Pacific. In June 1944, a Japanese torpedo bomber attacked them. 16 of his crewmates were killed in the explosion. Douglas was thrown by a depth charge blast, injured in the abdomen, and left with trauma that never left him. He spent weeks sick with malaria and was medically discharged in 1945 with shrapnel scars and the memory of bodies floating in the sea. He carried that weight for the rest of his life and poured it into every intense role that followed. Back in New York in 1945, he tried to rebuild his acting career. His Broadway debut paid only $7 a week. He lived in a tiny flophouse room for $5 a month and waited tables at Schrafft's to stay alive. He also taught dramatics to children, just to cover rent. Nothing came easy. But then, Lauren Bacall stepped in again. She recommended him for a role in The Strange Love of Martha Ivers in 1946. Director Hal B. Wallace watched Douglas perform and hired him. When the film premiered in London in June 1946, and then in New York on July 25th, critics immediately took notice. Douglas had taken a small supporting role and turned it into a forceful performance that rewrote his path overnight. In 1947, he played Whit Sterling in Out of the Past, a character so cold and cunning that it reshaped how studios saw him. He fought with producers on set, refusing to let them dictate every choice. That independence became his trademark. That same year, he starred in I Walk Alone with Burt Lancaster, and their off-screen rivalry became famous. Douglas demanded equal billing, and the argument that followed set off a two-decade feud. The tension between them gave their scenes an electricity that audiences loved. His real breakthrough came in 1949 with Champion. He trained with real boxers, took real punches, and even broke 3 ribs during filming. Production paused, yet he returned insisting they keep going. The film opened on April 9, 1949, and earned him his first Academy Award nomination. He even had plastic surgery on his nose before filming and made the crew choreograph every punch to protect it. Champion made him a star. Even off-screen, the conflict continued. Arthur Kennedy, his co-star, accused him of stealing scenes and nearly got into fights with him. People said Douglas's ambition was contagious, but exhausting. That drive turned him into someone Hollywood could not ignore. In 1950, he took on Young Man with a Horn and threw himself into trumpet training so deeply that he clashed non-stop with director Michael Curtiz. Douglas improvised solos during filming, stretched shooting schedules, and was even fired for a day. But his commitment gave the film its emotional edge. That same year, he performed in The Glass Menagerie on Broadway, playing a failed poet who reminded him of the boy he once was. Critics praised him, but he walked away from a Tony nomination to focus on film, which angered theater purists and pushed him further into Hollywood's arms. Then came Ace in the Hole in 1951. Douglas played a ruthless reporter who twists a tragedy into a news spectacle. The story was so dark that Paramount pulled the film from wide release. Critics said it was too shocking and too cruel. Audiences didn't understand it at the time, but decades later, people started calling it a masterpiece. Douglas had created one of the boldest characters in early American cinema, and the controversy only fueled his legend. When he played Jonathan Shields in The Bad and the Beautiful in 1952, the whole town felt it. He studied the real moguls who ruled Hollywood with fear and control, then pushed himself so deep into the role that the lines between acting and truth vanished. On set, he would hold back cues and leave co-stars hanging, pushing their anger to the surface so the camera could catch something real. Director Vincente Minnelli later admitted the tension made the film electric. Some actors hated the mind games, but Douglas didn't care. He had grown up watching powerful men bend others to their will, and he poured that memory into Shields. The film won 5 Oscars and became one of the sharpest looks at how Hollywood chews people up while pretending to celebrate them. Douglas knew that world better than anyone, which is why his performance cut so deep. 2 years later, he found himself battling something far stranger than Hollywood. On the set of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea in 1954, the giant animatronic squid that was supposed to terrify audiences nearly drowned him. During a tank scene, the machine jammed and wrapped around him without loosening. Crew members rushed into the water to drag him out. Production shut down for days, and the story made headlines. Douglas kept everyone loose by cracking jokes about Disney's effects, calling the squidfish food, and even slipping it into the script. Scenes had to be reshot again and again, but his calm under pressure held the movie together. When it finally hit theaters, it pulled in more than $28 million, which would be around $280 million today. His on-screen heroism felt real because it came from a real moment when he had almost died. Then came 1956, and a role that nearly broke him. To play Vincent van Gogh in Lust for Life, he starved himself until he lost 20 pounds. He painted between takes, carried a sketchbook everywhere, and let the loneliness of the character swallow him. People on set whispered that he wasn't Kirk anymore. Director Vincente Minnelli said he became Vincent. Co-stars said he grew tense, paranoid, and sometimes locked himself in his trailer for hours. When filming ended, he collapsed into therapy and spent weeks trying to pull himself back to normal. But the transformation earned him his 3rd Oscar nomination and helped the movie earn over $5 million, around $50 million today. Critics could feel the pain in every frame because it was his pain too. 1 year later, he gave Stanley Kubrick what might be the boldest moment in Paths of Glory in 1957. His character, Colonel Dax, delivers a furious speech that wasn't in the script. Kubrick let him improvise because he recognized the fire building inside him. Douglas pulled from his own wartime memories and from the injustice he had watched as a young soldier. The scene was so raw that France banned the movie until 1975. Kubrick forced endless retakes, trying to squeeze out absolute truth, and Douglas gave him everything he had. That speech is still studied today because it feels like a man speaking from his soul, not an actor reading lines. Later that same year, Douglas joined Burt Lancaster in Gunfight at the OK Corral. He played Doc Holliday with a sharp edge, chain-smoking real cigars until he coughed up blood. The realism worked on screen, but behind the scenes, things were boiling. Douglas, Lancaster, and producer John Houseman fought over profits for weeks. The arguments almost shut the movie down. Douglas later said the cigars helped him stay in character and also helped him hide the stress of the constant bickering. The movie earned more than $11 million, nearly $110 million in today's money. But the feud damaged his friendship with Lancaster for years. As Douglas entered the 1960s, he stepped into a different kind of battlefield. In 1955, he created Bryna Productions and took a risk that changed Hollywood forever. When he hired Dalton Trumbo to write Spartacus in 1960, he openly credited a blacklisted writer during the height of the Red Scare. Trumbo had been jailed and had spent years writing under fake names. Douglas knew he could destroy his career by standing with him. People warned him that he would be finished. He ignored the warnings. He insisted Trumbo's real name appear in the credits. That decision helped end the blacklist by 1961 and restored the careers of dozens of silenced artists. Douglas later wrote about the threats he received and the fear he carried, but also the pride he felt for doing what was right. Spartacus became a symbol of courage long before audiences even watched the film. That courage followed him onto the set. During the arena revolt scene in Spartacus, the production brought in 8,000 extras in full Roman armor. In the chaos, a chariot stunt went wrong. Douglas was thrown and broke his jaw. Production was tight, and he refused painkillers, knowing they would dull his focus. He iced his face, clenched his teeth, and finished the scene before going to the hospital. The movie went on to win 4 Oscars, and Douglas's injury became part of its legend. The war between Douglas and Kubrick didn't stop there. During Spartacus, they clashed so fiercely that Douglas fired Kubrick and hired another director. Hours later, he realized the movie needed Kubrick's vision and asked him to return. Kubrick came back and demanded reshoots. Douglas called him a genius and impossible in the same breath. Their fights became part of the film's myth, showing how 2 strong minds can collide and still create something unforgettable. Not long before Spartacus, Douglas had braved entirely different conditions. While filming The Vikings in 1958, he went to Norway to shoot real scenes in freezing fjords. He dove into icy water again and again and eventually caught pneumonia. Production stretched from 1 month to 2 and cost an extra $1 million. At one point, the local crew went on strike, demanding higher pay. Everything stalled while Douglas recovered. In the end, the movie became known for its sweeping landscapes and Douglas's relentless realism. But the toll on his body was something he carried for years. During The Devil's Disciple in 1959, danger struck again. A bombed-out church set collapsed unexpectedly, trapping extras under falling beams. Douglas was close enough to see how fast it happened and immediately took charge. He shouted directions, guided people out, and helped pull survivors from the rubble. His quick actions prevented what could have been a tragedy. The story spread through Hollywood, and people began to see him not just as a star, but as a natural leader under pressure. That sense of justice shaped him in every role he took. In 7 Days in May in 1964, he played a military officer who uncovers a coup. It was a risky story during the Cold War. He pushed to add dialogue about civil rights that was not in the original script. Director John Frankenheimer wanted to keep things clean and safe, but Douglas refused. He wanted the character to stand for something real. Their arguments grew so intense that production nearly derailed. The final film became one of the most important political thrillers of its era because Douglas refused to water down the truth. In 1966, he faced something far more personal. While filming The Brotherhood in Sicily, a helicopter he was riding in crashed. He fractured vertebrae and spent months recovering. The pain stayed with him for the rest of his life. That crash changed him. He stepped away from heavy action roles and turned toward producing and humanitarian causes. He later said, the crash reminded him to value life beyond fame. Even as he aged, he refused to slow down. At 69, he reunited with Burt Lancaster for Tough Guys in 1986. He jumped off a moving train for a stunt and dislocated his shoulder. Doctors urged him to stop. He kept going. The scene became a symbol of who he was at heart, a man who never backed down from a challenge even when his body was begging him to. It was the last movie he made with Lancaster, which gave the stunt an extra layer of meaning. In 1991, he appeared in The Secret, a movie about aging and infidelity that echoed parts of his own life. But in 1996, everything stopped when he suffered a stroke that paralyzed half his face and destroyed his speech. Most people assumed he would never act again. Douglas refused to accept that. He spent months relearning how to speak. By 1999, he appeared in Diamonds with his grandchildren, using his impaired speech as part of the character. It moved audiences because it was real. His final film, It Runs in the Family in 2003, showed the full circle of his life. He acted alongside his son and grandson and refused to hide his hearing loss. He had lived jokes about it, turning a weakness into something warm and human. The performance touched critics because nothing about it was polished or masked. It was pure Kirk Douglas, a man who lived through danger, triumph, heartbreak, and recovery, and turned every scar into something worth telling. Kirk Douglas stepped into marriage young and full of fire, but nothing in his life ever stayed calm for long. In 1943, he married Diana Dill, and for a moment, it looked like he had found a peaceful place to land. They had two sons, Michael in 1944 and Joel in 1947. And from the outside, it looked like a picture of a rising Hollywood family. Behind closed doors, it was the opposite. Kirk was already chasing fame and chasing women. In his 1988 memoir, he admitted he had affairs almost every night. Diana found out early, and even though she tried to hold the marriage together, the cracks kept getting bigger. By 1951, it fell apart. Kirk said he was devastated, but the damage had already settled deep into the family. Michael carried that hurt for years, and later said he felt abandoned as a child. Even after the divorce, Diana and Kirk stayed friendly. But the emotional cuts never healed, and the breakup set a pattern Kirk would struggle with for decades. The shadows got darker in the summer of 1955. Natalie Wood was only 16 or 17 when her mother arranged a private screening at the Chateau Marmont with Kirk Douglas. He was one of the most powerful actors in Hollywood at the time, and her mother thought the meeting would help her daughter's career. Instead, Natalie came home shaken. In her sister Lana's 2021 memoir, she said Natalie whispered that Kirk had hurt her. She never told the world while she was alive. Her family stayed silent to protect her rising career. Kirk never addressed the story before he died in 2020, and the truth remains locked in memory. It became one of the darkest chapters in Hollywood's history, whispered for years and never forgotten. Then came his second marriage. In 1954, he married Anne Bidens, a sharp Belgian publicist who understood the world in a way Diana never could. They had two sons, Peter in 1955 and Eric in 1958. Anne knew Kirk had affairs and even said she accepted that part of him. She said expecting total fidelity in Hollywood was unrealistic. She stayed loyal anyway. They remained married for 63 years until his death in 2020. Their life together was filled with strange turns, like the time Anne convinced him not to get on a private plane that later crashed and killed everyone on board. She also saved his finances when his career dipped, stepping in to manage the business side of his life. Their marriage became a mix of honesty, endurance, and survival. Kirk's bond with Michael was just as complicated. He helped launch Michael's career with the 1969 film Hail Hero, but the two had a long history of emotional distance. Michael spent years feeling overlooked. In 1992, when he battled cancer, the fear of losing him pulled them closer. After Kirk died in 2020, the world was stunned to learn that he left nearly all of his $61 million fortune to charity instead of his children. The Douglas Foundation got most of it. Michael wasn't upset. With his own $300 million net worth, he told the world that he respected his father's choice and understood the mission behind it. Their bond had healed long before the will became public, and that mattered more than the money. The family also faced heartbreak that never left them. Eric Douglas, the youngest son, struggled with addiction for years. He overdosed in 2000 and spent 8 days in a coma. His parents tried everything. They sent him to 20 rehab centers, but nothing worked. On July 6, 2004, Eric was found dead in his New York apartment at age 46. The autopsy showed alcohol, tranquilizers, and painkillers in his system. Kirk later wrote that he blamed himself for not being present as a father when Eric was young. Eric's death shattered the family and pushed Kirk into speaking publicly about addiction, hoping his son's struggle could save someone else's life. Despite all the chaos in his personal life, Kirk kept giving back. In 1964, he and Ann created the Douglas Foundation to help kids who grew up with the same kind of poverty he once knew. By 2020, the foundation had funded more than 400 full-ride scholarships at St. Lawrence University, his alma mater. Each scholarship could cover up to $200,000 for 4 years. The goal was simple: send hard-working kids to college without the weight of money holding them down. They also donated $8 million in 2010 to expand the program even further. Students who earned the scholarship had to show leadership and potential. Many said it changed their lives. Kirk always said education was the path that lifted him out of poverty, and he wanted others to feel that same lift. His courage stretched far beyond Hollywood. Starting in 1963, he served as a goodwill ambassador, and during the 1980s, he began smuggling banned manuscripts out of the Soviet Union. These pages carried the voices of dissidents like Alexander Solzhenitsyn, people who risked everything to write what their government tried to silence. Kirk hid manuscripts in bags and film reels. If he had been caught, he could have faced arrest, but he kept doing it. The books were published in the West and helped the world understand what life under Soviet censorship looked like. It was a part of his story few people ever knew, but it showed the kind of bravery that lived behind the movie roles. Then came the stroke in 1996. It left him partially paralyzed and struggling to speak, but it did not silence him. Instead, he fought harder. By 2000, he was standing in front of Congress, pushing for stem cell research that he believed could change medicine for people like him. His speech was slow and difficult, but it moved lawmakers. The Douglas Foundation raised more than $100 million for medical research and charities. Some of that money supported studies for Parkinson's disease, spinal injuries, and other conditions. Kirk believed science could save lives, and he never stopped supporting it. His work earned the highest honors. In 1981, he received the Presidential Medal of Freedom. In 1985, he became a Chevalier of the French Legion of Honor. At the 2001 AFI Lifetime Achievement event, he stood in front of Hollywood and told the industry to stop chasing greed and start giving back. Many stars later said that speech changed how they viewed philanthropy. Awards piled up over the years, but Kirk always insisted the real reward was knowing he made someone's life easier. His impact could be seen across Los Angeles, too. In 2004, he and Ann gave $2.5 million to transform the old Culver Theater into the Kirk Douglas Theater. It became a home for new playwrights and shows that later found their way to Broadway. The foundation promised to match theater fundraising, which brought in nearly $4 million for productions. In 2013, they funded an $8 million renovation of the Douglas Family Early Childhood Center at Sinai Temple, giving low-income families support. and giving young children a safe place to grow. These spaces still shape lives every day. When Kirk died on February 5, 2020, at age 103, the world thought his estate would be divided among his sons. Instead, almost every dollar, $50 million of his $61 million fortune, went to the Douglas Foundation. Children's Hospital Los Angeles received $2.3 million for a surgical robot that helped save young patients. St. Lawrence University gained more scholarship funding. Community playgrounds and arts centers grew because of his donations. He wanted his money to lift people who had never been given a fair chance. His sons received nothing. Not Michael, not Joel, not Peter. The remaining $11 million was directed to other charities. Hollywood was stunned, but Michael's reaction silenced every rumor. He called his father a legend, a man who lived with purpose, and wrote that he was proud to be his son. He said Kirk's greatest legacy was not wealth or fame, but the lives he changed.